On this Monday night, torrential rain and fierce winds batter BC. Raging floodwaters, an entire city evacuated, motorists rescued by helicopter as highways are washed away.
It's Mother Nature.
The effect of extreme weather in BC and what's in the forecast. A First Nations fight with the Ontario government, the demand for answers about what's in the air. Jason Kenney versus his own party. The new challenge Alberta's premier faces. The UK's terror threat level rises.
Remain utterly vigilant.
The investigation into the blast of a homemade bomb and winging it in Nova Scotia. The Steller rare sight that has birdwatchers all aflutter.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin on Canada's west coast where torrential, prolonged rain has washed out highways, trapped hundreds of people in their vehicles and forced thousands of people from their homes. All major highways connecting the lower mainland to the rest of British Columbia are affected. The extreme rainfall has led to multiple landslides. On Highway 7 between Agassiz and Hope, provincial officials say 275 people, including 50 children, were stranded for hours between two slides. Search and rescue teams were deployed, and Canadian Armed Forces Cormorant helicopters are conducting what they say will be multiple flights to airlift people out. A section of the Coquihalla Highway is washed out. The entire city of Merritt, 7,000 people, is under an evacuation order after flooding caused the wastewater treatment plant to fail. Every major highway leading into Vancouver is cut off by flooding or mudslides, including the Trans-Canada Highway, effectively cutting off road access to the lower mainland and Vancouver Island. Last night, the Agassiz Fire Department managed to rescue 12 people from their vehicles, which were filling with water and debris. There's also major flooding in the greater Vancouver area. And as the rain subsides, gale-force winds are moving in. This barge broke loose and drifted towards the seawall at Sunset Beach in Vancouver. We begin our coverage tonight with Robin Gill, who is in Abbotsford, about an hour and a half from Vancouver.
Abbotsford is in the heart of British Columbia's farming community, but today it looks more like a fishing village. Don Ellis can barely make out the 3 acres of his farm.
But you know, when you live by a creek, you expect one morning you're going to get up and get your feet wet. That's inevitable. But like I said, not like this. This is something else.
All that rain has forced the city to declare a state of emergency. 100 homes near the water are on evacuation alert.
I've lived here for 68 years. I've not seen this kind of rainfall in those 68 years.
In this part of British Columbia, at this point in the season, it's known as November rain. But this isn't normal. In the last 24 hours, about 100 millimeters of rain fell. That's a record. And by the end of the day, looking at about 240 millimeters in total. In Merritt, the city has been deluged. The community of 7,000 people has barely recovered from the summer fires, and now they're on the run from floods. The entire city was ordered to evacuate after the region's wastewater treatment plant failed.
I've been evacuated already once from the fires, and to be in Merritt, and to have the possibility of it happening again is kind of crazy.
I hate to say it, but it's global warming, and it's not looking good. Scary times, to be honest.
There never used to be a river there.
And with the rain comes landslides, closing major highways around the province and forcing passengers to sleep in their cars overnight. A team of disaster experts is working to get them out by air.
We have a nice break in the weather here where the rain is light, the winds are light, and we're removing people from that trapped area, about 20 at a time, to a reception center here in Agassiz.
Back in Abbotsford, the intense rain is expected to give way to strong winds, which could be a whole new round of trouble. There isn't much Don Ellis can do.
Well, a lot of cleanup. The cleanup is the sad part. So it's just going to be one hell of a mess.
But just hunker down in this soggy mess. Robin Gill, Global News, Abbotsford, BC.
Some regions in BC have received more rain in the past 36 hours than they usually get in the entire month of November. Joining us is Global News meteorologist Yvonne Schalle. Yvonne, what's caused this extreme rain and what's coming?
Donna, an incredible storm wreaking havoc for all areas across the south coast, and it's all courtesy of an atmospheric river taking aim at the region and that moisture being drawn in just north of Hawaii. Now, as we get in through the day today, the rain is going to taper off. We have seen rainfall amounts since Saturday afternoon, upwards of 270 millimeters near Hope, Agassiz and Chilliwack with over 200, and Abbotsford even getting 165 millimeters so far and counting. Vancouver Harbour and out of the airport with over 100 millimeters. Rain will taper off, but now with the passage of this cold front, the big weather story that we're following for the afternoon and continuing for the evening, winds. We've got wind warnings and special weather statements extending into the southern interior, anywhere between 70 and then gusts of up to 90 kilometers per hour. Ground so saturated, anticipate power outages as well as fallen trees across the region. And with the cold front, we are going to see that freezing level drop, snow heavy at times for the mountain passes, upwards between 15 and up to 25 centimeters. Donna?
All right, Global News meteorologist Yvonne Schalle on the extreme weather in BC. Thanks. An Ontario First Nation has obtained previously withheld data about air pollution that forecasts alarming levels of cancer-causing chemicals in the air. The Aamjiwnaang First Nation outside Sarnia is surrounded by industrial plants and has among the highest levels of air pollution in the country. The people were told they would be partners in a health study to see if there was a link between the environment and their health. But it wasn't until the First Nation contacted Global News that the data was shared. Carolyn Jarvis reports.
In Aamjiwnaang First Nation, air pollution, flares lighting up the sky, and noise disturbances are a regular occurrence.
I don't know what that is.
What's also unknown are the health impacts of having industrial neighbors that are, in some cases, mere steps from homes. A health study announced by the provincial government in 2017 was meant to help gain understanding. For months, Aamjiwnaang has been asking for some of the data informing it, but the government didn't provide it.
This is just the continuation of the Canadian legacy of putting Indigenous people, people of color, at a lower place.
Those reports and those studies, if they're not sharing it, must indicate that, there's definite data to show that there's issues, that there's impacts.
In mid-October, Global News began asking the government for the data. Last week, the Ministry of the Environment finally shared the documents with the First Nation. They show, through computer modeling, that benzene levels, a chemical linked to cancer, could reach up to 44 times the annual level in the industrial area and also in North Aamjiwnaang. The modeling also predicts sulfur dioxide levels at or above the annual level in similar areas.
There have been a number of studies that demonstrate increased level of hospitalizations, an increased level of mortality, even with these higher levels of SO2 on a long-term basis.
The ministry says it is taking action on benzene and saw a 50% reduction in levels in North Aamjiwnaang last year. And just last week, it put forward a proposed regulation to rein in sulfur dioxide from petroleum plants. If approved, the regulation will require companies to share emissions data with local First Nations. The people of Aamjiwnaang only wish that same rule would apply to the government.
And we could be a great partner if we were included.
The health study is expected to be completed next spring. Carolyn Jarvis, Global News, Toronto.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was in Edmonton today, side by side with Premier Jason Kenney, to announce Alberta is the latest province to sign on to a federal plan to provide $10 a day childcare. The $3.8 billion agreement will roll out over the next 5 years. It includes all types of licensed childcare facilities, which was a sticking point. The deal says childcare fees will be cut in half by next year and go down to $10 a day by 2026.
But I am really, really pleased to be here today with Premier Kenney and the government of Alberta to demonstrate that on the things that matter most to citizens, on the things that matter to the people that we serve, we can get big things done.
About 60% of Canadian children are now covered under the deal. The Northwest Territories, Nunavut, New Brunswick, and Ontario are the only holdouts on the National Child Care Program that was included in April's federal budget and which the Liberals campaigned heavily on in the last election. Premier Kenney's leadership is under threat by members of his own party. More than 1/4 of the United Conservative Party constituency associations are now asking for an early leadership review. Global Edmonton's Provincial Affairs reporter Tom Vernon is with me from Edmonton. Tom, how serious a challenge is this for Premier Kenney?
Well, Donna, it puts the idea of fighting for his leadership directly in front of him. What these Constituency Association presidents believe they have done is triggered a clause in the UCP Constitution that requires an early leadership review, and they want it held before March 1st. Now, Premier Kenney has been pushing back against challenges to his leadership for months now, cutting deals and kicking people out of his caucus. The most recent deal was cut with his caucus to hold a leadership review in April. That would be held at an annual general meeting. These presidents say that's not good enough. It would be held at a time when farmers are busy seeding and calving, and it would only allow members attending in person to vote. They want one that is held that would allow every single member of the UCP to be able to cast a ballot. Adding to the intrigue in all this, the return of Brian Jean, a co-founder of the UCP. He's seeking a nomination to run for the party, and his entire plank is to remove Jason Kenney as leader. Donna?
More to come on this. Tom Vernon in Edmonton. Thanks.
You bet.
The federal Conservative leader Erin O'Toole is also facing a challenge to his leadership.
Under Erin O'Toole's leadership, the rift in our party is growing. He told us.
That's Denise Batters, a Conservative senator from Saskatchewan. She's launched a petition calling for an early leadership review within 6 months. In a tweet, she says O'Toole reversed core policies without input from members in caucus, then lost the election by every measure. Batters has 90 days to gather signatures from 5% of party members in at least 5 provinces to force a referendum. O'Toole isn't scheduled to face a leadership review until the party's next annual convention set for 2023. In the UK, the terror threat has moved up a notch to severe after a terrorist incident outside a hospital in Liverpool. Police say a homemade bomb detonated in the back of a taxi, killing the passenger. The driver managed to jump out and survive. 4 men are being held and questioned under the Terrorism Act as police investigate. Our Europe Bureau Chief Crystal Gamansing reports.
Police say it was a homemade bomb that went off in the back of the taxi. The attack has been labeled terrorism. The passenger was killed in the explosion, but 4 other men, all under the age of 30, are being questioned as a part of the investigation.
Our inquiries indicate that an improvised explosive device has been manufactured, and our assumption so far is that it was built by the passenger in the taxi. The reason why he then took it to the women's hospital is unknown.
David Perry has been identified by British media as the taxi driver. In security video, he can be seen jumping out of the vehicle. He escaped serious injury.
But what yesterday showed above all is that the British people will never be cowed by terrorism. We will never give in to those who seek to divide us with senseless acts of violence.
The terror threat alert in the UK is now at the 2nd highest level, severe. It's a warning to the public that attacks are highly likely. Sunday's explosion was the 2nd alleged terrorist attack in the UK in the past month. In October, British MP David Amos was stabbed to death while meeting with constituents.
We as a government, I as Home Secretary, continue to work with everyone when it comes to the security of our country and making sure that we're taking all the necessary steps required.
Police identified the man killed in the taxi blast as 32-year-old Imad Al-Swilmin. They say their investigation is still active and officers are working at multiple scenes. Crystal Gamansing, Global News, London.
In Washington, Steve Bannon, former chief strategist for Donald Trump, has appeared in court on contempt charges. Bannon turned himself in after refusing to cooperate with the investigation into the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. He's not being kept in custody and will be arraigned on Thursday. If convicted, Bannon faces up to a year in prison for each charge. It's not clear if the prosecution will sway any of the other 35 witnesses who've been subpoenaed but have refused to cooperate. Beefing up sanctions against Belarus, coming up the EU's next move as the migrant crisis deepens. Plus, from happy feet to aching feet, one penguin's journey crossing continents. The air over India's capital is so toxic, schools and construction sites have been shut down for 4 days. The country's Supreme Court also ordered offices to close so people can work from home. The amount of hazardous particulate matter in the air is 6 times the global safety level. Coal-fired power plants are one of the main reasons for the heavy smog, along with farmers burning crop waste. The European Union is stepping up sanctions on Belarus in response to an escalating migrant crisis on the border with Poland. The sanctions target a number of individuals and entities for facilitating illegal border crossings into the EU. The EU accuses President Alexander Lukashenko of pushing migrants towards its borders to undermine security, a charge he denies. Most of the migrants caught in the middle of the diplomatic standoff are now stranded along the border in freezing conditions with limited food and shelter. And the head of NATO has warned Russia about its military buildup along the border with Ukraine.
We know that Russia has been willing to use these types of military capabilities before to conduct aggressive actions against Ukraine.
Jens Stoltenberg called on Russia to be transparent about its activities and to prevent any further escalation of tensions. The Ukrainian government claims nearly 100,000 Russian troops are amassing across the border. It says its own military forces are ready to repel any possible acts of Russian aggression. The Kremlin dismissed claims it's planning any sort of attack as inflammatory. Ahead, how the supply crunch is holding back the recovery of some small businesses. Supply chain issues are affecting businesses of all kinds, especially retailers who rely on imports. As Anne Gaviola explains, big companies tend to be more flexible and resilient than small and medium-sized ones who are worried about what the holiday season might bring.
November was nerve-wracking for the Dutch Growers Garden Centre in Saskatoon. Some of their holiday stock was on board a cargo ship that lost 109 containers off the coast of BC, followed by a fire on board. Now, their situation was unusual, but their predicament, waiting on holiday merchandise, was not.
Retailers across Canada have been literally sitting on pins and needles, waiting since August. When are my shipments going to come? How much are they going to cost?
As a medium-sized business with a handful of locations, the garden centre has been able to pivot to local goods, but even that strategy has its limits.
When it comes closer to Christmas, you're going to start to see the shelves getting thinner and thinner.
The supply chain crisis impacts goods made overseas that come to our shores by boat. There are issues at every link in the chain, from manufacturing to shipping and trucking. Larger businesses and multinationals with deep pockets have more options than small and medium-sized companies, such as chartering their own cargo ships and even buying part of a shipping port. Smaller firms don't have the same bargaining or purchasing power. Dan Kelly represents the interests of 95,000 independently owned businesses across the country. The toll is still being felt from nearly 2 years of pandemic restrictions, while big box rivals were allowed to stay open and reap record profits.
1 in 6 small businesses will permanently close their doors as a result of the damage that they've sustained during the pandemic.
Independent business owner Julie Fass says only the most nimble can survive ever-changing COVID rules, labor shortages, cost increases, and the supply crunch.
It really has been miraculous in some ways that we can keep pivoting.
Her shop sells things that people like to touch and smell before buying. Now she hopes people will shop local and support homegrown entrepreneurs trying to recover.
It does take a bit of an effort, but I know everyone wants to see these small businesses succeed.
Rather than flocking to big box stores or Amazon, even if it means more effort and more money. Anne Gaviola, Global News, Toronto.
Next, the odyssey of a rare eagle from Russia to Nova Scotia. This little penguin is a long way from home. It's an Adelie penguin and was found on a New Zealand beach at least 3,000 kilometers away from Antarctica, its natural habitat. Locals named it Pingu, and after some rehabilitation and food, it was released back onto a beach just east of Christchurch, New Zealand. It's only the third Adelie penguin that has been found on New Zealand's shores. In Nova Scotia, birdwatchers have been captivated by an eagle that's normally spotted half a world away. It's a Steller's sea eagle, a rare Arctic bird that can be bigger than a bald eagle and is typically seen in China, Japan, and Korea and the east coast of Russia. As Ross Lord explains, birdwatchers are flocking to catch a glimpse of this winged wanderer.
So the whitebarrow is on what we call the leading edge of the wing.
When Diane LeBlanc found out this bird had been seen in Nova Scotia, she took flight, out the door.
The first immediate response when you hear that there's a Steller sea eagle in Nova Scotia is a heart-pounding bird emergency feeling where you feel like you have to just move as quickly as you can.
She drove immediately to the community of Falmouth, an hour away. There, she joined an exclusive group of bird lovers, seeing and photographing the Steller's sea eagle, a magnificent bird of prey with a different appearance than the more commonly seen bald eagle.
We could definitely see the markings, that bright orange bill and the white on the sides of the wings, the shoulders.
With a wingspan of 2.5 meters and weighing up to 9 kilograms, the Steller's is the largest eagle in the world, as heavy as an average 1-year-old boy. It seems the eagle has been away from home for a long time. Seen in Alaska last August, possibly swooping down over South Texas this spring, then turning up in Quebec and New Brunswick in July, before causing a stir in Nova Scotia this month. That's almost 11,000 kilometers from its native range in China and other parts of Asia and Europe.
It's somewhere in between extremely unusual and 1 in a million. The thing about, when a bird like this shows up, it certainly was not on a lot of people's list, so to speak, as the next super rare thing to show up.
The Steller's eagle is declining in number. Wildlife groups consider it a vulnerable species.
Number 353.
For Diane LeBlanc, the Steller's is a precious entry in her life list record of confirmed bird sightings. She hopes the eagle can make a life for itself in North America, or even better, finds a way to fly back home. Ross Lord, Global News, Windsor, Nova Scotia.
And that is Global National for this Monday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is another bird. It's a common nighthawk in Regina. Once abundant, it is now threatened. We'd love to see your Canada. Please email it to viewers@globalnational.com. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.